Okay, my last video. So basically what I did with the dye project is trying to value the saturation of the fabrics and kind of get a quantitative kind of look at how time affects depth of color. So throughout the experiment, I tracked the amount of time that they spent in the bath, and like to the blind eye, you could see that there was variation. But I kind of went one step further and went on to Adobe Photoshop and imported images of each of the pieces of fabric. So I took the pictures of the pieces of fabric in the same lighting. It was in natural light, so no like fluorescent light changing it or anything. And I took them all within the same time frame, so they just all have the same exposure to light. So no matter what, with everything else holding true, the only things that changed were the amount of time they spent in that dye bath. And so what I did was I imported them to Photoshop and used like the little eyedropper to find the values for red, blue, and green, and then also found them on these charts like these guys. And then I made two different charts. So one with the values that were on these images, the ones in the left column, and then made a graph based on the ones in the right column. And they followed a similar trend, but their exact slopes are not super close together, but I'll get to that. So first off, I did the 5 minute ones, and then I just kind of did this comparison with all of them, and I just took a screenshot from my computer as I was doing it so that I could remember what the numbers were. And so like this is just all of them with their varying colors. So you can kind of, I'll go a little bit closer. You can kind of see the slow changes. And the issue with this is that the fabric wasn't completely evenly dyed. And so if I picked a color that was on the lighter side, as you can see here between 30 minutes and 1 hour, this color is clearly darker than this one. So there are some inconsistencies. It's not a perfect system, but I'm just trying to get an understanding of what changed. And like kind of, it's more like a general understanding, not a perfect understanding. And so yeah, like this is significantly darker and this one's a little bit lighter. So it's not perfect, but as you go through, it's like a little bit deeper version of this one's a little bit more accurate. But yeah, so these are the screenshots from Photoshop. And then I went and took averages. So I inputted them all. And so then I just put them all in I took 4 tests. Some of them had like 5 or 6 tests on them. I just took the first 4 that I saw, and then found an average for each of the values, like for R, G, and B. And then I put those averages together in this table right here. And then right here, we have our chart, or graph, excuse me. And so as you can see, they all are on a negative trend, which leads me to believe that the Adobe Photoshop method of valuing saturation is different than what I had thought it was. Because clearly as time went on, the fabric became more saturated and became much more dark. So I'm assuming if you inverted this graph, they would all be positive. I think it's just the way that Adobe grades saturation. I could be wrong, but I think based on my assumptions, I don't believe this is what the graph should look like. And if you look over here, like they all are kind of slowly but surely decreasing in each of these columns, which makes sense with this graph. So I think it might be the opposite of, like, the more saturated it gets, the lower the score. Just as like something that I think might be true. So this is the first graph, and then as you can see, I threw the equations on here just to kind of compare them with the ones on the next sheet. And granted, they're not super close together, but honestly, the charts look very similar. So here's this one, and it's on the same downwards trend. So I'll zoom out one more time. This is basically how I set it up. I just put in the values for R, G, and B from those second screenshots and just kind of line them up like this. And then I put together this graph, and they're still all on a downward trend. The red category is not super steep. Same with the other graph as well. And the blue and the green ones, both are a little bit steeper. The blue significantly, or definitely the most, definitely has the largest slope out of all of them on both graphs. So clearly something, the largest change that's occurring between these time periods is the change in the color blue. And so that leads me to believe that with these changes in the color blue, that means that there's more blue ink that's been absorbed and is being reflected back out. Whereas the shorter period of time, there's less. So this is just kind of the way I wanted to quantify the changes in color. Not a perfect system, once again, but I think it is nice to see some representation. It carries over between the two graphs, just kind of the similar slopes. And so, yeah, I think it kind of solidifies what I originally thought would happen, is that the longer the time spent in the dye, the deeper the saturation. So, I mean, clearly I didn't really label my graph or my graph. Goodness gracious, I cannot get my terms correct today. I'll throw some different, where is this? This is my one thing with Google Sheets, or with the Apple Excels. It's not great. Yeah, but basically I should have labeled my axes. That one's on me. Down here, this is time versus saturation. But yeah, so I think, yeah, I didn't think that was gonna work. Well, I'll make sure to change it for future use. But yeah, so that was kind of the conclusion of this dye segment. But as you can see, that there's a negative relationship between time and saturation. I do believe, though, that Photoshop has a different valuation than what you're supposed to be using for dyeing, but this was the closest I can get. But yeah, thanks for following along with me. But yeah, that's it.